The White Pill is available now at whitepillbook.com. This episode is brought to you by Patriot Gold. Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. I am kind of ecstatic about our next guest because this has been Martin Shkreli is here. He is kind of an internet legend. And I'm really excited to talk to him. For those who don't know, Martin, I actually made it a point not to look up the details of your case because you're one of those people who've had to live, I don't know, I want to say maybe not nightmare, maybe it is nightmare, but you're someone who's been basically tried in public, in that people have this whole narrative about you and your life, which I'm sure inside of some kind of Plato's cave version is analogous to the facts of the case, but they've constructed this whole persona and biography about you, and now you basically have to live it. The narrative is that you're this kind of rich kid, you bought some kind of drug, you jacked up the price to some crazy result. It's either an AIDS drug or a diabetes drug, depending on the narrative. As a result of this, poor people couldn't afford it and they're dying. You're smirking all the way. You get arrested. You go to jail. I bet you literally 99% of people, if you ask them why you went to jail, they would not even begin to give you a hypothesis. But they don't care, because you fit into this kind of character that people who grew up with movies and TV have, where you're kind of the villain in a John Cusack movie, and this guy's too big for his own britches, and good, let him get his comeuppance. The one part of your biography I do know is you did not come from money. You grew up your parents are immigrants. You grew up in Sheepshead Bay. I grew up in Bensonhurst, which was very much a sister neighborhood to that. It's hardly Park Avenue, to put it mildly. And in fact, to show you what kind of Brooklyn cred I have, I'm going to show you something right here that's going to mean something to you, but not to everyone else. Can you see what this is?
Of course, yes.
Did you ever go there?
Of course.
So Del Mar is one of the legit pizzerias in Brooklyn. This card is so old, it doesn't even have the area code on it. But let me assure everyone listening to this, Sheepshead Bay is not some bougie place. It's deep in Brooklyn. So can you talk a bit about what that's like in terms of, first of all, there's no reason people even know who you are. You were just basically plucked out and just fit into this story that journalists want to write. Can you explain like how divergent what I just described is to what the actual story is?
Yeah, I mean, it's very surreal. You kind of, I mean, when we grew up, I think we're the same age, from the same place, basically. I used to watch Peter Jennings on ABC News, and he was this like very authoritative, serious figure, and I believed everything he said. And I'm wondering if maybe I was just young and stupid.
Yes,
and
you were. Yes,
it was just
they've been lying for a century. Remember the Spanish-American War? It's been yellow journalism ever since.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I was just a mark as a child. I didn't know better. I just didn't know any better. Or if is it that transparent today what the news is? I just got a message from Politico, and maybe, it's up to you as to whether to keep this or not. But Politico just wrote me that they're writing a hit piece, most likely, about my relationship with Vivek Ramaswamy.
Okay.
And who you had on just the other day, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there I don't really have much of a relationship with him. I mean, he and I were literally in the exact same field on Wall Street, 10 years ago or something. So of course we know each other, but I don't talk to him or anything. Maybe once every couple of years I say, how are you doing, or something like that. But we're not friends by any stretch of the imagination. We don't hang out. I've never met his wife, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just this kind of pulling at all possible strings, which, again, I think journalists sort of have that duty to do it, but I can't even respond to this person because I know what'll happen. They sort of will sit down and they're not interested in the truth. They're interested in whatever can manufacture clicks, whatever can manufacture kind of, attention.
Do you think it's a clicks and attention? Don't you think they're just trying to take him down now that he's getting some momentum? Yeah.
There's that overriding agenda for sure. But like, there's probably more legitimate ways to sort of have a gripe with Vivek's policy than to sort of drag me into it. Like, it's sort of sad.
You're not exactly running. Sorry to interrupt you, but if I'm just some rando and I read this article, it sounds like if he becomes president, you're running like HHS. That's the impression I would get.
That's
from
probably
this article.
the implication they're going to draw. And it's funny because Vivek never was a part of any drug price increase thing that I ever did. He and his firm invested in our companies and did it really well based on our innovation, where we did research and stuff like that, because this was like my first company. And, we created a brand new drug for kidney disease. Very few people talk about that. So, if I just ran on this like platform in pharma of just like buying drugs and raising prices, I don't think Vivek would have invested. And I don't think his firm would have invested. What was amazing about Vivek is that he was like 26 working at this gigantic hedge fund and managing, like over $1 billion at that age. And he was good at it, which like there's nobody on Wall Street that's like that. Like today, over the last 10 or 20 years, the guy was a phenom. And let me tell you something, it's not easy to do. It's not easy politically because those older guys are trying to, they don't like you, waltzing in and, trying to take their capital. It's not easy intellectually. It's one of the hardest games in the world, trying to pick what stock's going to go up. And he managed to make it work. So kudos to him, and I have nothing but respect for him. And like I said, I think he's like a very principled guy. If you look at what he's done in pharma, it's pretty different from what I did on the commercial side. On the research side, we did kind of similar things, but Vivek's responsible for like a number of great new medicines coming out. He's a really smart, principled guy. So I feel bad that like I just got this email like literally a couple hours ago, and I'm just like, I know, just as a parable to your question, like I know what the media does. Like they try to, depending on what side they're aligned to, they just try to sort of spin a narrative. And in the old days, again, I don't know if I was just an idiot kid or not, but I kind of believed the news. And, today it's impossible to, knowing how it works, being the subject of news articles, you just sort of sit there and say, how does the average person like even possibly get the truth from anywhere? It's not possible. So for me, like, I don't even know where to start in terms of like correcting the record, but my sort of spiel is, again, I'm an Albanian immigrant. New York's a melting pot for sure, but Albania is a very small country. There's only 2 million of us. So I hesitate to say that like we're a minority or something like that, because it's Eastern Europe. And I don't know how far you need to be to like become not white or like not Caucasian. I really don't know any of those politics or how that works. I mean, I guess because my skin is white, that makes me like this like generic American, like spoiled person. But
as some from the Soviet Union, the Albanians aren't exactly bougie. No. It is very much a kind of like the equivalent of maybe the Irish in Eastern Europe, to put it mildly.
To put it mildly, I mean, it's the poorest country in Europe. My parents, live in mountains. The only thing there is just rocks and mountains, and it's it's started to become a bit of a vacation spot, but Albania's about as rough and tumble as it gets. And it's like I feel very weird being colored as like
a wasp.
Yeah, like it's just nuts. Like our parents came here, didn't speak English. They had to do odd jobs. My parents did sanitation stuff, managerial stuff, doorman, those kinds of things to make ends meet. While their 4 kids tried to succeed in New York, and it sickens me that like I automatically get this like step down because there's something about my skin color that somehow has given me this great advantage. And it's like, I don't feel like I'm like this mainstream, Caucasian person. If I grew up, as a first generation or second generation or third generation, instead of what I am, which is a barely first generation. My sister is 2 years older. She was born in Albania. So like we came here without anything. I mean, the clothes off our back, and had to work hard to sort of make something out of, anything. And it's extremely competitive environment here in New York, as you know. And, fighting to go to Stuyvesant or Hunter or whatever, which is the closest thing you can get to even a small approximation of what wealthy kids get at Dalton and Collegiate and these schools in New York that cost more than your average college or more than your average Ivy League school. And kids like Epstein, Epstein taught at Dalton, but like the kids that can afford to go there because their parents are CEOs and stuff like that, we had to compete with that kind of education by attending these public schools where we were in the top 1% of New York students to get that free education because our parents didn't have any concept of paying for education. So it was like such a slap in the face when people say, I'm like Charlemagne the God said I was privileged on his show. And I'm just sitting there like, dude, you don't know anything about me. It's the average Albanian in New York.
In his head, you're the villain of a John Cusack movie. You're that ski instructor who's sitting there smirking, rolling up in the limo while the poor guy's trying to fight for the girl, and you've had it easy all your life. The extent to which people buy into narratives that are in the media in terms of perceiving literal human beings is insane. If you ask anybody, what kind of a job does a policeman do on a day-to-day basis? They would think of NYPD Blue, or they would think of these, cop shows, knowing full well that these shows are only tangentially related to reality, but that's their only basis for figuring things out. So they see someone with a smirk, it's like, oh, okay, like A, B, and C must necessarily follow.
Yeah, I remember I'm just thinking back to all the moments I had growing up where I had no money and wanted to do things and, had to ask my parents who, again, the thing about the old country is that like the idea of money going to any children is like, just nonsense, like you provide food for your kids and that's it. So like the idea of like an allowance or like any of these American customs are like very anathema. And like, so like when I wanted something as a high school student, I really had to go crazy to justify it. And all the other kids in high school had money. It just was like a given. Even kids who are in similar economic circumstances. But for my parents, it was just like, it's not something that we really subscribe to because we're from Albania and, the customs there are very, very unusual and different and difficult. And, so I started working at 16, working for a hedge fund, which most people can't get into a hedge fund now, even with an MBA and 2 years of, working at Goldman Sachs. But I used my intellect and charm to get in. I worked there for 4 or 5 years. This was with Jim Cramer and his fund and his colleagues. And then I went to a very, very big hedge fund, again, extremely prestigious. And I fought hard. I beat 99% of people each time to get to that, top coveted spot. And I worked like an animal to do it. So, and I didn't make any money for that whole period, right? Like I only started making money as an entrepreneur when I risked life and limb for my businesses. So this is what the American way is supposed to be, right? And I think you have people who are out there who want to attack it, whether it's politics or the appendage they have, which is the media, that tends to want to sort of take the American dream and shift it to one of this like amorphous equal opportunity that's so equal nobody ever gets anything anyway. So like I sometimes wonder if like even if we have a system that rations kind of this opportunity and luck to a few, I wonder if that's still better, even if you admit that and concede that, which I'm not sure is true, that it's not really a meritocracy, which I'm convinced it is, that, even if it is kind of that, random lottery drawing, I still think that's better than communism. I still think that's better than a handout state, that just sort of distributes, redistributes money, needlessly and endlessly. So I don't know, like, I think the media's lies about me are somewhat well documented, but probably some of the frustrating ones were the coming from, a background of wealth. Probably the biggest frustrating one was this is a guy who raised his prices and that's it. We didn't make any money from Daraprim, the extremely rarely used medicine for toxoplasmosis. I never had anything to do with insulin or EpiPen or any of those things. I never made those drugs, never will. And, even if you sort of like sweep away the price increase stuff as, okay, this guy's a bad guy, forget his rationale, forget his side of the story. Let's not even listen to it. It's not even worth, him having one sentence in. Even if you accept that, my price increase stuff was like 5%, maybe 5 or 10% of my career in pharma. So like, what about the other 90%, right? It's almost like you're only known for the one bad thing you did. And the other, part of your career, is irrelevant. And that's frustrating as well, because I do have a good story for that 5% or 10% on the price side. I have a really good story that makes sense to me and makes sense to most people I tell it to. But, I usually don't get the time of day to explain. But the other 90% of my career, I made lots of great medicines. I was one of the first pioneers developing ketamine for suicidality. I got
Wow, that's
FDA approved.
wonderful.
Yeah, it's a wonder drug
That's
for
such a
people.
that I mean I know I have had friends, and this also works with especially vets with PTSD. Ketamine was used as a horse tranquilizer. Then in the 90s, it was used recreationally. In fact, it's the first drug I ever tried. I've never told this story. I'll tell it now. I tried it because I was scared of doing weed because that's for hippies. But this you snort, so this was my way of being cool. And the person who I did it with was Scarlett Johansson's brother because he was dealing it. And I didn't do that much. I didn't go into a K-hole, but I felt like a little badass. This was right out of college. But now, now that it's been destigmatized, in some ways kind of resets the brain. I'm not a scientist, of course, but when you have these vets who come back, they don't come back the same way. And one of the answers is just give them to Pfizer and they're treating the symptoms all their lives, but it's like you're not treating the cause. Whereas drugs like ketamine, in my understanding, often kind of give that brain a reset and they could have some semblance of normalcy instead of having to constantly treat a lifetime of suicidal ideation and PTSD. Folks, experts say that China is hoarding a massive amount of food. They'll soon have over 2/3 of the globe's corn reserves, over half its rice, and over half its wheat. But when asked about it, China lies. One China expert said they, of course, will never admit to doing something like that. Well, what does China know that we don't? When it comes to global food shortages, China is the canary in the coal mine. You see, China is the world's #1 food importer. They rely on the rest of the world to keep their people fed, so they can't afford to mess up, or there'll be riots, civil panics, or even worse, when over 1 billion people can't eat. So what does this mean for Americans? 2 words: food shortages. That's why it's a smart idea to stock up on a kit of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food. You can create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits, which are hand-packed in the USA. They're compact and stack easily, and they have delicious different breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. And their 5-star reviews on the website rave about the flavor and taste. Right now, you get 10% off of 4 Patriots survival food by typing in the code MALICE at checkout. Go to 4Patriots, that's the number 4, 4patriots.com, and use code MALICE to get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriots survival food. That's 4patriots.com, use code MALICE. Folks, cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. I'm not talking about some weird mind voodoo from my crazy neighbor. You know who it is. We're talking about our sponsor, Fume, F-U-M, and they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong. So instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? And Fume is an innovative, award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, they use all natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. And your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting. So it gives your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. Stopping is something a lot of people put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason it can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com and use code MALICE to save 10% when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com. Use code MALICE to save 10% off your order today. You know Dave Smith and his very failed podcast and how he's always playing around with that device of his. Do you want to be like him? Of course not. It's a disaster. Tryfume.com. Use promo code MALICE and get control of your bad habit. Don't be like Dave. Let's get back to the show.
Yeah, so it started out at Yale. A couple of very smart people at Yale tried ketamine on their patients, both by IV and intranasal. It was most remarkable antidepressant ever. And they were just like, this was around 2011. It's Carlos Zarate's group over there. And they just were confused as to what was happening. So they tried to give like other anesthetics and they didn't see the same result. And then they said, well, you can't really take this stuff by mouth because of the way the molecule is. So IV kind of sucks. So let's try intranasal. And we, in this small startup from New Brunswick, New Jersey called Johnson & Johnson, I don't know if you heard of them, we started racing, some fly-by-night guys. We started racing with them to get FDA approval. They won the race. The whole time I was told, this isn't worth it. It's an off-patent drug. Don't develop it. You can't make money on it. Which, first of all, I didn't think was true. it is an off-patent drug, but you still find ways to sort of make money on it. And there's a lot of these drugs lying around that, are kind of old, but like they're still, the people deserve a chance. And depression runs in my family. There's lots of people I met over the years that are severely depressed, and Prozac just doesn't do the trick.
Yeah.
It's a pretty shitty drug. So it's all we got. So this thing's like 10x Prozac and has pretty much no side effects if you use it kind of as directed. And as they found a smaller dose actually tends to work, which you don't need to go into the full-blown K-hole, which is kind of amazing. So Johnson & Johnson got approval. They call it Spravato, and they're actually selling a ton of it, which is good for them, good for America, good for everyone, in my opinion. I'm not an anti-pharma guy. I am the farmer bro. So you're not going to get the conspiracies out of me. I think J&J most of the time is trying to do the right thing and making medicines that help people, and this is undoubtedly one of them. Pharma doesn't always get it right, but at the same time, like the people in pharma are real people. They have family with cancer. They want them treated, they want them cured. So I think that ultimately, we lost the race. This drug that I developed is still in phase 3. It'll probably be approved in a year or two, which isn't always the end of the world. But regardless, that was a big effort of mine. The people within my own company didn't want to do it because they thought that we couldn't make enough money due to patent expiry. Like you said, ketamine has been around since the 60s. So you can't really get a patent on it, but you get some little side benefits that, you still get like a couple of years no matter what. So anyway, like I did that. I got a drug FDA approved for kidney disease. That's a brand new drug, never would have happened without me. So people suffering from a certain kind of kidney disease are benefiting from that. But nobody wants to talk about any of that. I invented a brand new drug that we put in clinical trials. So I, unlike almost every other drug CEO, I actually know a lot about discovering drugs and making medicine from scratch, where a lot of these guys are like lawyers or like something like that. I think I won't throw stones at specific people, but you can look into the backgrounds of your favorite pharma CEOs and take a look if they were actually drug discovery people or they maybe are masquerading. And so I even got shade from my own industry, and I'm just like, what you guys are throwing stones at me? Are you kidding me? And so I made this website. It's now no longer on the web, but it was called pharmaskeletons.com. And I named every single company's like dirty laundry. It's just like, every one of you fuckers has done something like this. But now that the spotlight's on me, I'm the sort of sacrificial lamb. And listen, I'm a big boy. It never bothered me that Lauren Duca would come at me or random celebrities like Stephen Colbert or whatever. Like, go ahead. I'm not scared of you guys. What worries me is that when the government uses their apparatuses to go after you and you didn't do anything wrong. I have thick skin. All the left-wing celebrities in the world can make fun of me. I'll dish it right back out. I'm from Brooklyn. That's the rule of the street there. It's the rule of the street,
Yep.
My mind. So when Hillary Clinton did it to me, I said, I'm not going to take this lying down. I'm going to make fun of her. I'm going to make fun of Bernie, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, and if anyone, Republicans too, who are mysteriously very quiet about this. But I asked a friend who was in the White House at the time. Obama was in charge. And I said, I'm not hearing anything from Obama or Biden. And he said, Martin, they're not running for election. I said, if they're running for election, they'd have your name in lights. And it was election year, so Hillary and them were doing their best. And I honestly think it backfired. I actually think that it wasn't exciting enough for left-wing voters to say, oh, is Hillary and Bernie really going to stop a guy like this? And it actually sort of looped around where people like Milo, who I was and am still friends with, people like, and I don't know what your guys' relationship is, people like that who are like more right-wing provocateurs who are younger and like, quite frankly, were kind of inspiring. And like Milo used to say, they're kind of like punk rock in a lot of ways. Like the defiance is cool. The willingness of someone like myself to throw a rock at the system and say, fuck you. That's something that Kurt Cobain would do, right? That's something that, and I actually talked to Courtney Love about this. Like, that's something that the rebel says, I'm not letting you, put my name in the dirt. I'm never going to let you do that. You're going to have to take me you're going to have to drag me down physically and beat me up if you're going to do that. And, they were willing to do that. But what I didn't expect is like the willingness of the rest of government, what some would call the deep state or whatever. And you could put me in one of those categories of people that didn't think that existed, right? Until I met it face to face, and it was really alarming to see things like the FTC, the DOJ, even the IRS, even places that really have nothing to do with anything, sort of get militarized in a way to like attack against one person. And it's such an alarming, scary thing that the state can wake up and say, whoa, this guy's a bug in the system. We don't want this guy. And
I don't understand how, as an Albanian, this was something where you're like, oh, this happens.
It was an expectation that the America we hear about and read about when we're children is real. And I think that like this very naive, like, I don't know about you. I went to the school PS 197 that Bernie Sanders incidentally also attended. And like, we had all the patriotic stuff. We had to say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, which is probably considered racist now. We had to like sing all these songs and like do all this stuff that's like, very American. It was first Gulf War, so it was like tie yellow ribbon around the old oak tree. Military is the best. WWF was doing like anti like Middle Eastern tropes. Like this was a time when like America was America, and that's not a good thing, by the way. But they were running with stuff like that, and I was really spellbound by this freedom of speech, and even things like search and seizure, which are supposed to be illegal, and stuff like that. And then, you realize it's all farce in some ways. If the system wants to get you, they'll bend and break every single rule. And when I say they, it's still so stupid to me to say that, because there is no they, there's no person. There's no, like, the government is millions of people, right? Which is, as Vivek is trying to, point out, is kind of a problem. But those millions of people are not one person. I mean, some of them, feel a certain way and some of them don't. So there's this, I think, this incentive system really that's the root of the problem. It's not so much that there's a they, that there's some clandestine group of like shadowy superpower people. These are relatively normal people. They're not people I like, or people maybe that you like, or maybe people that are listening like, but they're normal people that have families. They work for government, yes. So we have something against them, but in general, like, I don't think they're evil cabal. I think that they have some weird incentive they have to respond to, though, where it's either someone above them wants something, or something in the case that I've examined, where there are people that think they can use or take an action that may help them more than it helps. They basically subordinate the needs of the country to their needs. And I think whenever you have that agent manager problem or agent owner problem, where the United States has appointed you as an agent of the country and it trusts in you to do the right thing for the country, but instead you take that power and say, I'm going to do the right thing for me. And if it just so happens to coincide with the country, yeah, well, whatever, I'll think about that later. And we see every senator, every House of Representative person, and every deep state person, even more so because they're unelected, they run amok with that power and say, well, it's my power. I don't have to sort of earn it, And I think that's kind of the thing that scared me the most, being, a lot of people said, Martin, I wouldn't want to be in front of the Senate or Congress. I'm like, that'd be great. I'd love to give them a piece of my mind. What an opportunity. Most people can't get in front of a senator, let alone 10 or 12 of them in one afternoon. Man, I would love that. Bring me there tomorrow. I'll give them a C-SPAN they'll never forget. But, that's just me. Most people would be deathly afraid of it. But the thing I was not deathly afraid of, but frustrated by, was the DOJ, the FTC, all these people just saying, how do we use our power against this guy?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not the first or the last, whether it's the January 6 people or any other example you can think of quote unquote political prisoner, whether it's Dinesh D'Souza, who gets, did he go to jail? I forget.
He went to jail.
Yeah, he did a little bit of time over a campaign finance thing, which is like, you can accidentally break one of those things. Like, it's so ridiculous. And again, there's
not exactly a threat to the community. It is no one there was no concern that Dinesh D'Souza is going to go on a kind of murder rampage, to put it mildly.
We have to, I think they say deterrence.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's like you have to deter someone from spending $4,000 instead of $2,000. God forbid, because that's what's going to win your fucking election. I also noticed, like, I have a friend who's going to be running for Congress, and they're very young, which I think is a great thing, because Congress is just full of old people that have no clue what's going on. And it's a very dangerous thing. But anyway, the point I'm making is that this person told me that they raised the FEC threshold, I think, to like 3,300 from 2,800. And I'm like, if there's one thing the government keeps track of very closely is inflation for that. They haven't updated inflation for anything else. We got to fix that before we fix anything else. We got to make sure that money's coming in for our ads.
Let me just ask you, Stalin's last and most brutal dictator, executioner in many ways was Lavrenti Beria. I discuss him in my book. Then you write, The White Pill. And his most famous quote is, "Show me the man, I'll show you the crime." And it seems very clear in this case, if you were some kind of tax cheat, that's just the IRS. But the fact is they had you. The media made you out to be some kind of monster. And now it's like, all right, we've got the guy. Now we got to find something to pin on him. Like we're told in school, and obviously you're nowhere near as nefarious, even if everything about you is true, as Al Capone, right? He's clearly a murderer. This guy's a horrible person. The income tax is what they got him on. Now we could look at that as like, that's a great thing, but it's like, is it? Like the income, they didn't really get him for the crimes that he deserved to go to jail for. Can you actually just break down quickly this whole thing with that drug and jacking up the prices, and as a result of that, did a lot of people die because they couldn't afford the medication? Can you explain that, please?
Sure. So I think most people don't understand the pharma industry, just like I don't understand the mechanics industry, the auto mechanic industry. I don't understand the semiconductor industry, right? Like I know in general how they work, but like I've never worked a day in semiconductors. So for me to tell somebody in semiconductors how their business works would be insane. But we tend to want to like think that we know how something works if we're a consumer of a product. And we've all consumed Intel semiconductors, but none of us could, 99% of us can't tell you how they're made, at least in really close detail. So the thing about pharmaceuticals that almost nobody knows is that, I'll say we for a second, the royal we don't ever get paid cash by patients, right? Like every drug we sell to a distributor. The distributor pays us full cash for it. And then the distributor sort of has to spread that drug out to different pharmacies. The pharmacies negotiate with insurance. Insurance covers Daraprim 100%. And virtually any life-saving drug, and when I say life-saving, I mean literally life or death. You will die tomorrow without this medicine. Insurance, in my experience, has never said no to a medicine. It doesn't make sense for them politically. It doesn't make sense for them financially. The drug business is $500 billion business. They don't pay attention to small drugs like Daraprim. They just greenlight them and say, when this drug becomes $1 billion drug, which they call a blockbuster in our industry, then we'll think about whether or not we can limit its use. A drug that they'd limit use for is Ozempic, very playfully called Hozempic by Dasha at Red Scare. Ozempic is a weight loss drug that people inject to be even skinnier. More and more people who are using Ozempic are not overweight people. They're people like Kim Kardashian and other Hollywood actresses that are looking to basically be even thinner and lose as much weight as possible. Of course, there are heavy people as well who benefit from Ozempic, but this isn't a drug that's life or death for anyone. And insurance says to Ozempic, okay, you want to use this drug, you're going to have to pay like $100 copay, maybe even more, and that's it. And they only did that because Ozempic became such a big seller. Daraprim never became a big seller, never was destined to be a big seller, because it's for a very, very, very small number of people who get this very rare complication of HIV. So whenever you have a small selling product, insurance just says, not even worth our time. We deal with $500 billion of medicine, $4 trillion of aggregate healthcare spend, a drug that sells 10 million or 20 million or 50 million. It's not even worth setting up the rule in Excel to even manage it. So what they're really concerned with is, okay, if you want to see a specialist, you have to see a generalist first. That's the kind of rule like healthcare insurance and health management organizations are focused on, because that's a rule that applies to everyone. A rule, setting up a rule for 2,000 people that take some random medicine doesn't make sense. So oftentimes, like I would sit there, if somebody said, "Hey, Shkreli, how dare you do that?" And I said, "All right, well, what is the price that you think you should charge for that drug?"
Right.
And they'd be like, "Oh, I don't really know how much drugs cost." And they'd throw out a number, and I'd say, "Okay, that's fine. But let me tell you about another company from Connecticut. They've got a nice drug. It's like a cure for this crazy rare disease." And I described it. I said, "Without this drug, you're probably going to die or have a very, very, very disabled life." And I said, "Well, what do you think this drug should cost?" And they throw out a number, and I'd say the drug costs $600,000 a year. And they said, and this is sort of the next big mistake people made mentally. And again, I don't fault anyone for not understanding this. I do fault people for not being more Socratic and more inquisitive and saying, well, what about that? And asking questions of people that know what they're talking about. So that drug is called Soliris. It's $600,000 a year. And the obvious question there, I would often get, is how can anyone afford that? Insurance. People don't pay $600,000 for a drug. The insurance sort of spreads that cost out amongst all of us. And the reason it costs so much is only a handful of people have that disease. So the company can't even afford to make it unless they charge a huge amount. Now, if you were lose the genetic lottery and you happen to have that disease, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, a disease most doctors don't even know much about, then your life is down the tubes, you're going to die, and you wish there was a company that made a medicine for you. It could be your son, it could be your daughter, it could be your cousin, it could be your best friend, it could be you. And you say, okay, well, does my life count? Just because I don't have diabetes, does it mean I have to die because there's no medicine? No, thankfully, there's a way to sort of say, well, if everyone pays $1, this thing is economical for the company, it's economical for you, it's economical for insurance. And again, this is not a big selling medicine that's bankrupting anyone. It's sort of half a blockbuster drug. It's doing well. Everyone's sort of happy. Nobody thinks saving these 3,000 or 4,000 people's lives that it saved is a bad thing. So Daraprim works a lot like that. Daraprim's only $75,000, and it's one time. That drug, you pay that Connecticut company every year.
Once. You take it once and you're done?
Once and you're done. It's for an infection. So
wow. They made it sound like you're paying this much every month. That's the impression I got.
It's $75K one time, and we also have all these discounts. So like if you don't have insurance or somehow you're undocumented or like, it was, it is illegal not to have insurance in this country, thanks to President Obama. So it's like, I'm just sitting there saying like, who doesn't have, because I'd say like, look, every insurance carrier covers it. Call United Healthcare, call Anthem, they all cover it. And someone would say, Mr. Shkreli, what about people who don't have insurance? And I just feel like, okay, well, it's illegal not to have insurance. I know because I got the bill from the IRS for not having it. And if you don't have insurance and you have a reason, we'll give it to you for free. But 95% of America has healthcare insurance. So it's the 5% that don't have it are like people so rich, they just say, I don't need to fucking pay it. I don't need Obamacare because I don't give a fuck. If you're Elon Musk or somebody like that, you don't have healthcare insurance. You don't give a shit. I didn't have healthcare insurance. I still don't. It's just not something that, crosses my mind, and, paying for a doctor's fee. And people that are fortunate enough to be in that position or people who are really young and they're just like, you know what, I'm healthy. I don't need health insurance, but you still get that IRS surcharge. I don't know if they finally did away with it.
They repealed it. Republicans repealed it. Okay.
Yes. So, but you, at one point in time, you'd get this surcharge if you didn't, sign up for Obamacare, which is like constitutionally crazy. And I paid that surcharge once. I want my money back. But the crazy thing is, like I said, I mean, people don't understand how this industry works. Why would you, like Socratically, why would you want to price a drug so high nobody can use it? Like, why would that benefit me at all as a rapacious capitalist? Like,
I mean, this also speaks to the whole idea that if you abolish the FDA, then everyone in the bars are going to be serving like poisonous moonshine and all their customers are going to go blind. And it's just like, why would I as a bartender even once serve gin when good quality gin, which is privately verified, is readily available, to cause all my customers to go blind and kill themselves?
I'm the one libertarian or Republican that likes the FDA. So I'm like, it's the one part of government I actually wouldn't change, knowing it inside and out. Like, the people that work there are not deep state people. It's very interesting. Only the commissioner is. The people that work at CDER and CBER, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, they're actually really good people. Like, they're honest. They've been there forever, which in this case is a good thing. They're all doctors that care. They're like drug nerds. They love medicine.
Wait, hold on. I've got to push back on this a little bit based on what Vivek said. Okay, and maybe we can move on. You don't want to have to answer this question because of your job.
Oh, I'd love to.
Folks, your welcome is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. And let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming, like when your favorite podcast is playing, the person next to you is talking, your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try. You might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive, collision coverage, or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates, quote at progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Let's get back to the show. I have a good friend, Chris. Shout out to Chris. And he's a big investor in healthcare. And his whole point to me was there are a lot of drugs that are currently in existence that, because of the onerous FDA trial situation, are not being able to be brought to market or to be tried on people. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, we can cure your cancer, but what are the long-term effects? And it's kind of like, well, I'm not worried about that. I don't have long-term effects right now. And Vivek made the point that the FDA is extremely political, that if you speak out against it, or if you are known to kind of be adversarial, they're very notorious for dragging their feet
I would
and
agree with
being
that.
kind of punishing those people who speak out against them who in pharma. So it's really a good idea to talk about how great they are as opposed to criticize them, especially publicly. So I don't know if you're in a tricky position, but that's was my
Those are
impression.
so 3 or 4 different points, but they're all interesting. Some I agree with, some I violently disagree with.
So please, yeah.
I would say on the speak out against them thing, I'd say that's true. I don't have any axe to grind in drugs anymore, so I don't care. And I have spoken out against the FDA in the past. So like I've been even handed on that. I do think if you're Pfizer or Merck, it's probably not in your best interest to like blast the FDA. I mean, I think that makes sense. Like they are the law when it comes to medicine. So I do think that makes sense. But many companies have said they disagree with the decision or whatever. So I think that's, partially true, partially common sense. Like, you don't want to insult like the place that, I mean, look, it's like sort of dealing with police or something. I mean, if every time you get pulled over, you try to have an argument with the police officer, probably goes better if you don't have an argument with the police officer. It's something like that, I think. So I would just put that there. Like, I don't think that's one, unexpected, or two, really problematic. You don't have to sing their praises. I'll say that. They don't expect that. And I think they were actually quite fair. I once had a big fight with them over a drug I was making for disease that strikes pediatric children, and it's very lethal. And I had 7 days of mouse data. And the guy there says, you need 28 days of mouse data. And I say, not for nothing, man. But like, as a scientist, that doesn't make a fucking difference. If these mice are living at 7 days and they're healthy, or they're going to live at 28 days and they're healthy. I just happened to do the 7-day experiment. And the guy was just arbitrarily like, nah, you got to do the 28 days. We're not doing anything. Consider this, your drug's never coming to America. I'm just like, come on, fucker. This whole thing's I'm a small company. This thing's going to take another 6 months.
While kids are currently dying.
While I have 3 kids in North Dakota or South Dakota who are dying, and this drug is proven safe at 7 days, they should be able to take this thing. And he's like, well, it's just a bureaucrat. And I'm like, fuck this guy. Those things do happen, but like by far and large, my experience with them was very good. And I had a lot of experience with them. If there's a life-saving medicine, they rush to get it FDA approved. The long-term side effect thing is not necessarily true. They do stallball you on something like blood pressure, or diabetes, or erectile dysfunction, something not important. They want all the data, all the evidence. And the problem with that, Mike, is like, so the part I'll agree with you wholeheartedly on is the cost to get a drug FDA approved is fucking virtually impossible. I mean, unless you're a large company like Pfizer, Merck, or Johnson & Johnson, you basically have an oligopoly on drugs. There's Wall Street for sure, but accessing Wall Street, it's not always readily easy. It's not like Vivek could do it, but like not every entrepreneur can easily raise the $1 billion it takes to get a drug FDA approved. And it's sad because that's not the FDA's fault, actually. They do require a lot of data. I kind of think they should require a lot of data. The problem is, to run a clinical trial, you need volunteers, not just the patients, but the physicians and the nurses. And it turns out that physicians and nurses respond to incentives, just as we all do.
Sure.
They are not going to do a clinical trial unless they get paid. And that's one of the biggest inconvenient truths, is that the average doctor, not just in America, but principally in America, I'd say, the average doctor loves getting paid, and the average doctor in America gets paid a fortune. And nobody's willing to say this, but I think that a lot of the blame lies there, because to do a clinical trial can cost over $100 million. And that's you have the medicine right there. And all the clinical trial is John, take this, Bill, take that, and let's write down, see what happens. It doesn't sound like it should be that fucking expensive, but it's a 50, 100, sometimes $200-300 million process, because the doctors have to sit there and watch and record it correctly. And the FDA wants it very particular evidence, which I think is actually good. You want good evidence. I don't believe in the libertarian trope of like all drugs should just be willy-nilly. that's where I think a lot of things should be willy-nilly, but like that's kind of, one thing that I don't mind. I hate to use the R word on anything, so I get allergic to it, but like a little bit of regulation in pharma is not the worst thing.
But that's a lot of regulation. That's not a little bit. If something is being completely banned, that's not a little regulation.
You're right. And I think that I struggle with this because I know that maybe COVID vaccine aside, and that's like a whole separate discussion. And the one Alzheimer's drug they approved recently, in general, I'd say that the FDA does their job really, really well. And when they approve a drug, it is safe and effective. When they don't approve a drug, usually it's not safe and effective. It's just that the level of proof they want is, I think, appropriate. The generation of that proof requires so much money and so difficult.
Here's where I disagree. I and many other people would be perfectly happy if something was unsafe and effective. Like if I have a really bad disease or even not a bad disease, and like, look, you're going to take this, it's going to cure you, but your hair is going to fall out. A lot of people will be like, fine, I don't care.
I think that one problem with that is how do you generate the evidence that it would cure you, right? So the system we have now is you got to prove it first. And if we didn't have that system, we'd have a lot of people saying that something worked and not generating the proof. And I think people are smart enough to tell A from B, right? But I think that, and that's the problem I have with Democrats in general and regulation in general. It's like, look, let the people decide, right? Like there's no need to, like, one of the things that I'm thinking about is my new chatbot that's like a doctor chatbot. And there's like concern from the regulatory side that it's like, well, should we let people have access to this? I'm like, it's a fucking chatbot. It's not going to jump out of the screen and bite you. Like, it's just a text, and it's like, well, it could be dangerous. And it's like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, and obviously like in a car, like for a self-driving car, if the car goes haywire, can mow into 20 people and kill them. That's a little scary, but you're also not regulating the guy who can drink a thing of vodka and go mow into 20 people either. So
I was a Y2K consultant. And because I always wanted to be part of the zeitgeist. I remember my friend at the time was freaking out because she's like, what if I heard that the nukes are going to like go off at midnight. And I go, if you're making a nuke, why would the default setting when something goes wrong be fire, right? And the same thing with these self-driving cars. Like, why would it be like, all right, if we need a reboot or blue screen of death, just start plowing into people. Like there would be so many, hopefully, and almost certainly fail safes that if things go bad, maybe it stops and the person gets killed in the driver's seat. But the idea that it's just going to start driving willy-nilly, I think that is kind of,
just so you know who you're talking to, I don't believe there should be a Department of Energy, a Department of Education, the CIA, an FBI, Homeland Security. I think we could do without the ATF. I think we could do without all that stuff. But just let that FDA live, I think. And again, I have no vested interest in saying this. I just think that the U.S. is a better place with the FDA than without. But virtually all those other things, even the DOJ, Congress itself should be like once a month, or like 2 months a year, like I'm dyed-in-the-wool libertarian, but that's one thing that I, kind of just feel like after having a lot of personal experience with, they're okay by my book. But I understand not a lot of people are going to necessarily agree with that who are admitted libertarians, but like for me, that's just makes sense. And again, I think knowing the drug development process so well, I wish it were cheaper to be able to make medicine. The problem lies in the physicians who want to do those clinical trials, or quite frankly, don't want to do those clinical trials unless they're paid a lot. And doctors are not always the super benevolent people we think they are. I think that's one of the real pernicious lies that exists. And again, I think we can automate some of this stuff with AI. And we are now seeing the government come against AI, which, I've helped form this like fringe group in Silicon Valley that's now becoming more and more mainstream. That's about protecting our right to bear computer chips, which is not in the Constitution, but in a lot of ways is the arms of the 21st century.
Yes.
And these NVIDIA chips it's an American company. They're technically made by Taiwan, which is very scary. because they someday may not be a Taiwan,
Right.
it may be a China, and they may not make these chips anymore. But there are these beautiful computer chips that are just at the cutting edge of technology, made by NVIDIA, California company, and they're necessary for artificial intelligence. And more, we just saw the White House come out and say that having the wrong training data for your chips may violate federal law. And I'm sitting here like, I'm going back to jail. Like, this is crazy. You know, this is the idea that like these chips may have data that become embedded in them that amplifies biases, and that in and of itself may constitute a federal crime. I'm just sitting here like, this is 1940, or this is
1984.
1984 all over again. Like, this is such a insane thing to say. And we're this fringe group that I'm a part of called EAC, effective accelerationism. It's like an antidote to the Silicon Valley billionaire who feels guilty that they made so much money, and they're calling it effective altruism. Our point is that you don't have to be embarrassed about being rich. In fact, you should be proud about it. And the most altruistic thing you do is advance technology. Technology is what's lifted the world out of poverty.
You're speaking to someone who upstairs in his house owns Ayn Rand's copy of The Fountainhead.
It's one of my favorite books. But
I'll show it to you if you're ever allowed to leave, when you're ever allowed to leave New York. But
yeah, if ever.
Speaking to what your point just, go ahead, finish, please.
No, I was just going to say, like, the idea that the government may want to peer inside of our computer systems at home, and that if we make an elaborate enough system that we'd have to register it with the government, it's such a crazy thing, because we have something so powerful. It's almost like the power of a nuclear bomb. And in fact, people in the safety community with that effective altruists have worried about AI safety. They've said, like, this is like the power of a nuke. And if you can make a nuke at home, that would be terrible, wouldn't it? And maybe the people who said the right to bear arms didn't envision that possibility. These are just computer chips. They're not that dangerous. But there is this increasing fear that they'll end humanity if they start to get even better. OpenAI is very scary. Like, it's very smart. Even a little bit more progress, 6 months to 12 months, could that be something that becomes a Terminator style thing? Now, we think that's preposterous, but the idea that has been bandied about such that you've got people in DC and elsewhere that are starting to say, maybe we shouldn't let these AI people do what they're doing. Maybe this needs to be regulated. Maybe, we need to do this. And of course, Elizabeth Warren's leading the charge on this, and she's very excited about, taking our freedom away. And I really hope that, our effort will stymie some of this, because again, the idea that there's certain kinds of computer code you're allowed to write, but there's certain kinds that it's too dangerous for it to happen. And the government's done this before, right? They had PGP that they tried to restrict and call it a military munition that you couldn't transport because of military laws, and they finally broke that law and said it was nonsense. But you can't put anything past this like Leviathan of a government that wants to strangle and choke every freedom we have left unless we push back.
What I'm hearing is that I should shoot Lex Friedman, and I absolutely intend to do so at the earliest availability.
Well, I like Lex.
I like him too, but he's got to go. You just made the case very clearly. He knows he's got to go. There's nothing human about him. Someone has to do it, and I'm afraid it's gonna have to be me.
I'm supposed to go on the show. I really like him because his podcast, before he called it Lex Friedman podcast, was called the AI podcast or something like that. So he was an AI guy. He's interviewed every important AI person. And the thing about Lex, to the extent it annoys anyone, is he's like too nice, right? Like, he's like very like,
you don't know him off camera. He's a violent murderer. Yeah. Okay, Martin, in all seriousness, let me just take a second to talk about one of our sponsors. We're doing really good things with money, and that's Patriot Gold. If you've been on the fence about buying gold and silver, have you seen what's going on? Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. Government's having to bail them out with our taxpayer money. Saudi Arabia is meeting with China to accept the yuan for oil purchases. Is the end of the petrodollar? I don't know. Xi Jinping is meeting with Putin in Russia. And behind the scenes, while we aren't paying attention, MasterCard, Citigroup, and other global banking giants have started a digital dollar pilot, what they call Biden bucks. Biden's fast-tracked this development. What does that mean? That means that the Fed will be able to monitor every transaction and devalue purchasing power even more. You know where else they have digital money? China. China's digital currency helps the CCP punish or coerce citizens with their social credit system. And if a citizen commits even a minor infraction, they can be blacklisted from traveling, going to restaurants, renting a home, having insurance. You don't think that could happen here? According to Bloomberg, the world is in the midst of a macroeconomic reset, and the shining star is gold, which may be your best protection against all these mega threats. The Wall Street Journal has stated that gold prices may be headed for record highs this year. So call the proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention my name, Michael Malice, and you'll always get best-in-class service from Patriots, protecting Patriots. Patriot Gold Group has the no-fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver, and you may be eligible for the no-fee for life IRA and qualifying rollovers. All you got to do is call 888-505-9845 to get a free investor guide, or go to malicegold.com. It's easy. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer 6 years in a row. So call 888-505-9845 or go to malicegold.com to protect your assets and secure your future. Let's get back to the show. There's something I wanted to bring up, and it kind of ties into what you were talking about with your Kafkaesque perception of what's going on with this. And I'm so glad I get to do this. I'm sorry you're so personable. I was really hoping you'd be smarmier like I am. Years ago on Twitter, you do not remember this, you told me that I wasn't funny and that I should focus on doing something that I'm good at. Not long after that, you told a joke on Twitter that was so bad, you went to jail for it. So who's laughing now, Shkreli?
You got me on that one. I do remember that. And do you know who Mike Ma is?
Yes.
So your name and his are, I think his name is a subset of your name, right? So I in my head sometimes confused you and him. So like the problem at that time was, which obviously at this point is, you can't really confuse. And I got his book in prison. He wrote this fever dream book that was like the schizophrenic rant. And
that applies to my books too. To be fair,
this was out there, and I got, it was like one of these books that's like probably illegal to have. Like for some reason, like there's a list of like 10 books in prison that you're not allowed to have no matter what. One is Behold the Pale Horse. I don't know if you know that one.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm guessing the Unabomber, or what's the one that he slept with Timothy McVeigh had under his bed? Turner Diaries.
Those kinds of books are basically like too dangerous to have in prison. And like this Mike Ma book, as I was reading, I was like, this feels like one of those books. Like I should hide this. And I for a second thought, I was like, is that the same guy?
But can you tell that story? Because that, I mean, I know you can laugh about it now, maybe to some extent, but that is, I mean, we could laugh at in the sense of the absurdity, but in terms of just like if you look at it, the horror nature is you tweet out something that's very clearly a joke, and as a result of this, you go back to jail. I mean, is there any point of that whole story where you're like, how is this really happening, even after what had already been done to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this guy, Yashar Ali.
Yeah, he's the one who just broke the Steven Crowder video, by the way.
Yes. So he is like, he was a New Yorker journalist, and he's like this very uppity, like at the time, especially was like very uppity social justice warrior, for lack of a better term. And when he saw my tweet, he was like, how in the world?
Well, can you explain the tweet though? Just tell the people.
I said, so there was this meme back then. It was like a 4chan meme of like lizard people, that like there's an Illuminati and they're lizard people and this and that. And I was having a lot of fun with this type of stuff on Facebook because I was banned from Twitter. And I already got banned for sexually harassing like Lauren Duca by just making fun of her. And I'm still bearing that cross on Twitter, still trying to get unbanned. Meanwhile, she's like advocated for the genocide of all white males. But I'm the one who's banned. So I'm on Facebook, the land of the free, apparently. And just tweeting all kinds of stuff. Like I've made all these jokes about being kidnapped by Hillary Clinton, like just nonstop, like memeing. I went to Hillary Clinton's house when she passed out that one day and started harassing her from there, like just yelling stuff. And in fact, still in that video, you can hear me in the background screaming, "Drop out, you suck," like stuff like that. So like if you literally go right now, like Google like Hillary Clinton like emerges from Chelsea Clinton's apartment in New York after passing out, like you'll hear my stupid ass kind of just like haranguing her. I have a right to protest. But anyway, I kept going with it. And I wrote this thing that was like, oh, maybe Hillary is a lizard person. And I kept going with it. And I said, well, if I had her DNA, I'd be able to tell if she was a lizard person. Again, pretty bad joke. And I even said, you know what? Being the rich guy that I am, I'll put down $5,000 for a piece of her hair. So that
wow, that is rich. $5,000? Damn, Shkreli.
So I can get the DNA, and then I'll test the DNA myself, and I'll tell you if she's lizard or not.
Yeah.
And it was a joke. It comes back from like this old thing. A lot of people think, okay, that's creepy or that's weird. But I remember like someone collects like at auction, there's like a lock of Beethoven's hair or like Einstein's hair.
I have Alexander Hamilton's hair right above my head on the wall. If you ever come over here, I'll show it to you. I'm not kidding.
Are you serious?
Yes, no. I'm dead serious. I have Hamilton, William Lloyd Garrison, Andy Kaufman, and David Bowie over my head.
My heroes.
Yeah.
So there's sort of that like old trope, and ironically, years later, the Secretary or the State Department advocated for the government, whether it's CIA or State Department or whatever, same shit, to basically, if you look this up, it's really eerie that, and I think Hillary Clinton's name is on it somewhere. They advocated to collect the hair of foreign dignitaries because it could contain DNA that they could use to possibly, compromise them. And I think it's like really ironic that is an official policy of the U.S. government. So my judge, who's very, very wise.
No, but hold on. So you tweet this out. How does it get to the point where you're in front of a judge?
Well, I tweet this out, and Yashar Ali says, "How is this not a threat of physical violence?" I'm just sitting there. It's a fucking joke, asshole. Like, I'm not. I don't think she's a lizard person. Like, I'm not going to pay anybody.
And it's hair, not her lungs.
Yeah. And I said that she's going on a book tour, and maybe she'll leave a hair behind, because we all will leave a hair behind. I look at my desk and I see loose hairs here and there. We have fucking, enough hair in her head falls out. And maybe she'll leave one behind on her book tour. So Laura Loomer, of course, goes to the book tour and almost gets arrested herself, yelling at Hillary. Secret Service grabs her, and they ask her, they're like, "Are you affiliated with Martin Shkreli?" She's laughing her ass off, like, no, I'm not here to get any hair.
Okay.
But so Yashar Ali, I think, was really the amplifier of this, because then like my prosecutors are like, let's ask that he be remanded. And I go to my lawyer, who's like a famous criminal defense lawyer, who's done like every one of these cases. And I'm like, there's no fucking way I'm going to jail over this, is there? And he's like, no, come on, Martin. The judge isn't that, no judge is that vindictive. And of course, 3 hours later.
But how'd you get the notification? You get a phone call? They come to your house?
There's a motion, and we had to show up on like a Wednesday. It was Monday, and like we had to show up on a Wednesday, and that was my last Wednesday at home. And
how long did you go for?
What's up?
How long did you end up going for?
5 years.
Wait, after that, it was another 5 years?
No, that I didn't get charged. That's not a crime, right? So the only thing that happened was my bail was revoked.
Okay.
Because I was a threat or danger to the community because of that tweet. And it's like, no, my status hasn't changed. Like, I'm still, just a person. Like, I'm not committing violence. I'm not advocating anyone can commit violence. She's one of the most protected people in the world. Like, and the judge said, listen, you don't know that one of your followers isn't crazy enough to take what you're saying, not, at face value, and go do it. And think about it and say, oh, 5,000 for every hair on her head. Maybe that's like, some kind of crazy, threat.
Do you know what the concern was? It was that Elizabeth Warren would scalp her and get $1 million. That was.
And I'm sitting there like, gosh, I really should have worded this differently or whatever. But it's like, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Like that, does that count? I apologize to Secretary Clinton. I would never call her Secretary Clinton, by the way. The judge always would. I'd be like, Miss Clinton. Yeah. And apparently it's like the most disrespectful thing to not call her Secretary Clinton.
Women love being called secretary. It's their highest achievement in life. But listen, at least you never have to call her President Clinton. But wait, didn't you go back to jail as a consequence of this?
Yeah, so I had not yet been in jail.
Okay.
I had my bail revoked.
Oh, holy crap. I didn't put two and two together. I thought you had been there, then you got out, and this sent you back. This is what got you sent in the first place? Got me
sent, and it was a big problem because my sentencing was coming up.
Holy crap.
it colored the sentencing of like, all
Yes.
right, this guy's a fucking dick. Like I had to take his bail out. He made a threat against, because the Secret Service called or something, and they were like, we had to double our security detail for Secretary Clinton due to this threat of violence. And it's like, that's not a good look, obviously, when you're about to get sentenced to a crime. And a lot of these judges don't know the difference between 20 years, 10 years, 5 years. They're just like, all right, scumbag, you're done.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and you know, look at Ross Ulbricht, right? Guy got life for drug dealing. And you know, he didn't. A lot of people think he got convicted for you know,
double murder, which wasn't even brought up in the case. I brought him up to Vivek, and Vivek had never heard of him, which I was very disappointed by.
That's disappointing.
Yes,
I'm more disappointed in Trump. You know, Trump.
Yeah, you don't got to tell me. Yes,
Trump said that this newest situation where the memester got convicted of doing that election
Douglas Mackey, yeah, Ricky Vaughn, yes.
And he said that would be my first pardon. I'm sitting there saying, oh, hold on. What about Ross Ulbricht, Julian Assange,
Kwame Kilpatrick,
myself?
Rod McGoy? Yeah, it's just amazing.
I was sitting there in jail, like, please, Mr. Trump, please pardon me, sending to all the right people. And it was just like, nah, I'm too upset I'm not getting reelected. And it's like, it always has to be about you. You know, the feedback I got was like, White House is empty. Trump's checked out. There's no way to get to him. He's too sad about not getting reelected. And I'm just like,
should have called him Secretary Trump. See, that would have worked.
You know, and now you're ready to pardon this guy, but you pardon Lil Wayne and Kodak Black. By the way, I love Lil Wayne and Kodak Black, but like, there's a lot of us who are like serious political prisoners, dude.
Let me ask this though, in all seriousness. The only idea most of us, and I'm sure you as well, have of what life in jail is like is from movies and TV shows, and we think it's Oz. Were you, as briefly as you can, were you in fear of your life? Is this the kind of thing where, I'm sure it's obviously traumatic. I'm not making light of it at all, but can you explain in like regular people terms what that experience is like?
I would say unless you get more than 10 years, you have absolutely nothing to fear or worry about. Yeah. Okay. So like, jail is, in fact, it's gotten so bad as to what it is, which is it's a warehousing of largely minorities. And if you're not a minority, you're either a sexual criminal, right? Or, for example, 2/3 of federal prison is minority. That's Hispanic and Black people who almost 100% have committed a drug or gun crime, or usually both. And again, this is numbers you can look up. This is not controversial. It just is what it is. I saw it with my own eyes as well. I looked up the stats, all checks out. 1/3 of prisoners are white. Almost every white prisoner is a sexual offender, which is very bizarre. And when I say almost every, maybe let's call it half to 75%. At the lower levels, it's almost all. So like, there's a safe assumption that you're a pedophile when you go into prison as a white person, as scary as that is. The other group of prisoners that are white there's of course drug traffickers. There's like miscellany of like fraud, and there's sort of like, even oddly, there are a number of political prisoners, quite a lot. There's hackers, there's stuff like that, and it's kind of a hodgepodge. So unfortunately, what's kind of happened is there's state government, right, that's supposed to deal with crime. And federal government's supposed to deal with crime that the state government just doesn't have the resources for. It's too complex for, something like that. What's ended up happening is these things are so both overfunded that they've sort of overlapped over each other, where a small-time drug dealer will get picked up on federal charges. And these are not El Chapos, by the way. Right. These are guys who are poor as shit. They are dealing a small amount of drugs on a street corner somewhere in Baltimore.
Often very uneducated. They're not. It's not like they're going to have some. They're not going to be farmer bros. No disrespect to you, but you know what I mean. They don't have a big future yet. So there's a huge incentive for them to sell drugs. Yes.
I taught some of these guys how to read, how to count. Some of them I taught fractions. Some of them I taught more advanced stuff. Some of them are very smart.
Yes.
But by and large, most of them were left high school early to become a drug dealer, to provide for their family. A lot of them are kind of this alpha male persona where they didn't want to, work at McDonald's. They wanted a life that they dreamed of, and they had no choice to get that.
And they're not long-term thinkers often.
No, not usually. And they're almost always might come from troubled homes. Almost always. In fact, I met one well-adjusted kid in there, a my friend Mike, who grew up with two loving parents who are like very like, lawn and, backyard and that whole thing. I grew up in kind of a crazy household myself. I didn't have all that. But almost everyone I met in prison was single parent, no parent, or deep abuse, deep drug abuse, physical abuse, something like that. So, the problem isn't so much that crime's going to happen. The problem is this warehousing of people that's just like, we make our own city almost. Jail is like a city. There's 3,000 people in the average federal prison.
Oh, wow,
right?
okay.
We have our own town to ourselves. We have our own pharmacy. We have our own store. We have our own dormitories. It's just a sequestered town of people who can't assimilate, theoretically, in society. And as the federal government grows and grows and grows inexorably, they stack these people in prison, and there's, I don't know what the answer is. Obviously, it's not a good situation, but at the same time, like, I'm not sure what the solution is either. I don't know that there's a better way. Obviously, I think these sentences are far too long, that most people in prison could get a tenth of their sentence, and all the same societal impacts would be the same. Every drug dealer that's taken off the streets is replaced by another drug dealer, right? It's not, like you're keeping dangerous people off the streets. None of these people are like murderers unless they need to be. And again, most of them are like corner guys. They're never, they're not sitting there.
They don't go for the CEOs. They go for the street guys, right?
Yeah. El Chapo's not going anywhere. The average Mexican cartel is pretty well secured at where they are. And these guys are literally trying to make money the only way they know how. And I think you could fault other things in society more than you can fault them. But regardless, I mean, I think that, the jail system isn't as much scary because in that community, right, that small city of 3,000 people, we're not trying to do anything that makes our lives harder, including fighting or killing each other or whatever. Like, it's stressful because we have things going on outside of prison that are stressful. Imagine not being able to provide for your kids and your kids' birthday's coming up. It sucks, right? As a parent, having to talk to your kid on a recorded line for 15 minutes, it's really embarrassing and difficult. So tempers will flare, but no, it's not Oz, and everyone's not lunging at each other's throats. If anything, we're actually trying to help each other a bit, feel good about each other a little better than we are because it's depressing as hell in there, entertain each other, pass the time, do whatever we can to support each other. So it's actually almost like, I hate to say it, like a loving environment. Like, people are really trying to boost each other up.
Fraternal.
It's fraternal. It's very fraternal. We're trying to, make that happen. The one thing I'll say, like, I get questions all the time. There's enough people who are homosexual in prison that if you're looking for that, you can find it. At the higher end prisons and like high security, and at the state level, you've got more of this like don't drop the soap type of mentality. But at the level of prison I'm at, everyone's very, very friendly. There's a lot of homophobia, interestingly. And then the like handful of gay people that are out and like gay, they're doing their thing, obviously. But there's not much intersection there or forced intersection. So it's pretty tame, in fact. In fact, there was like, I was at a high security place once, and I hate to say, like, maybe this is like psychopathic, but like there's a lot of action. It was like very like exciting environment to be in. And like sometimes I'd be like, oh, this place is really boring compared to, I was in MDC in Brooklyn, and it's a very high security, very dangerous place. And like that was the kind of place where like MS-13 would be riding around each other and fighting people and stuff like that. But it was that's not a place most people stay in or go to for the long term. Usually you go ship off to a prison that's fairly quiet. I mean, if you're looking for a fight, you can find one there. You can find one in Harlem right now. There's a fight everywhere if you want one. But in prison, it takes a lot. You got to be a real dickhead. If I could survive without getting into one fight the whole time, trust me, it's not that dangerous.
Martin, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I think it's great to talk to like-minded people. And I think you and your audience are like-minded. Like, it's nice to know that you're not alone, and that, like Vivek says, like, it's okay and you should not be afraid of who you are and what you believe in. And I think that to the extent that, especially to the extent that those beliefs are very reasonable, that we should be louder about those beliefs, that we can be louder. Like no one's ever said what Vivek has said, that he should shrink the government, like literally chapter, line, and verse of it. He's gone through places of the government that he cut in half or 90% or 100%. And like politicians are afraid to say that out loud. And I think like for me, when I raise the price of that drug or whatever I do today, I'm never afraid of saying what I feel because I have a lot of conviction and I have a lot of things to back it up. And there's some things that are still impolite to say or things that like are faux pas. And it's like, sometimes people need to hear the faux pas or we're going to turn into a society of, you know, pick your poison of what's going on today, whether it's children watching drag queens or, you know, people being more upset about pronouns than anything else or whatever it is that's going wrong with our country. If we don't speak up, you know, we run the risk of allowing that omission to get filled with a bunch of garbage. And I think you're one of the leading voices of people out there that say the things that they feel, if they have conviction and they have that determination, that we can be that, you know, kind of corny, but we can be the change that we want as long as we stop being afraid of the consequences of things that might happen to our job or things that might happen to, et cetera. And I did that and it cost me my job. It cost me my freedom. It cost me a lot of money. But ultimately, I do think there are some things more important and more powerful that if we don't take stands for in life, like what will our grandchildren say? Like, oh, Mike and Martin, they lie down for you know, our rights. And now it's you know, it's mandatory to watch drag queens in kindergarten. God forbid. Things like that or what we lose, you know, a little bit of money, even a little bit of freedom. There are men who gave their lives for the freedoms we have. I'm not afraid of going to jail, not afraid of paying millions of dollars. I'm not afraid of being lambasted, and neither are you. And I think that's great. And it's rare to find people that have that courage to stand up and stick for what they believe in.
You are welcome.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Fetisi.
I love hearing people's stories of resilience and grit. This is why I created this podcast.
We are very excited to welcome Jim Gaffigan, Yasmin Mohammed, Glenn Beck, Tim Dillon, Abigail Schreier, Jeff Garland, Ayan Hirsi Ali, Sam Harris, Heather Hying,
Jonah Goldberg,
Ben Shapiro, Glenn Greenwald, Sarah Shahi, Colin Quinn.
If there's a culture of victimhood, then let's tell stories of grit and survival.
Subscribe and listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
See what's screaming all month long during Pluto TV's April Ghouls. Watch hauntingly good movies like Evil Dead and Cloverfield, or terrifying shows like The Walking Dead and Nosferatu. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.